There you are now. Welcome back to the workshop. So today's episode is a wheels episode. I'm going to talk to you about split rim wheels. I had a little job going through the shop here for a customer, a regular customer of mine, and I thought what better than to bring you along for the job so that I could give you a few little insights that I have on split rim wheels. So generally speaking, split rim wheels, when we talk about split rim wheels, and this is not a mini specific thing, this can be really to do with any car whatsoever. When we talk about a split rim wheel, we talk about a wheel that is either in 2 or 3 parts. And what we are talking about is that the rim is split into components. So you've got an outer, you've got an inner, and then you've got a center hub. These wheels are 3-piece split rims. There's other cars out there that have 2-piece split rims, and what you would have is you would have the inner and the hub one piece and then the outer a separate piece. Or it could be a case of having the outer and the hub one piece and the inner a single piece. So they would be 2-piece split rims. Generally speaking, obviously you can't have anything less than a 2-piece split rim. Some of the really cheap kind of knockoff or split rim look-alike wheels would have a ring of bolts here to emulate the look of a split rim wheel, or maybe a ring of bolts here on the outside to emulate the look of a split rim wheel. But in fact, what they'd actually be is they're just a 1-piece wheel made up to look like it. These very definitely are a split rim wheel made up of 3 components. And what I am doing here is I am fitting new tires to these. Now you might wonder, why did I not just bring the wheels to my local tire shop and get them to change from the tires that were on these to the tires that the customer wants. The reason why is that the customer had actually done that himself. He had brought the wheels to a wheel shop near him and had Yokohama A808s fitted. He didn't actually want the Yokohama A808s, he wanted AO48s, but at the time couldn't get them. So he had the local shop change from the AO32s that he had on there to the 008s. But the 008 on the driver's side rim was actually leaking air. After a little bit of investigation from me, I found that the air was bubbling out of this side of the rim, and there's only one reason for that. There's a leak here somewhere in the way the wheels are sealed. Now, these are more than likely the way the wheel came from the factory with this sealant around here. To me, that looks like good stuff. It's either a Loctite silicone based, or it might be the stuff I use, which is a brand called Tiger Seal. I am not a big fan of this way of sealing these. I have used a lot of these wheels over the years. We used to run a series here in Ireland that was something similar to Mini Miglia in the UK, and split rim wheels were on all the cars, and I had a lot of doings with these. Personally speaking, the way I have found to best seal these wheels is slightly different than this running a bead of sealant around here, and I'm going to show you that now. First thing I want to do is I want to break this into its 3 component parts so that we can take a look and inspect and then clean thoroughly all of the mating surfaces. One of the things about wheels that I've learned over the years is scrupulous cleaning and spotless surfaces is the way to get a wheel to seal and stay sealed on a car. Believe it or not, tires are actually a moving surface. I've seen people in the past put like silicone sealant in here. That is never going to work because tires actually move on the rims. Now, some of the shops have a kind of a tire sealant paste that you put in here to help a little bit, but actually the single best way to get a really good seal on a tire is just really scrupulous cleaning and a flat, tight surface. And that gets you there. So the first thing to do to break one of these split rims apart is to loosen off this ring of bolts. They are M6 thread metric fasteners, which will mean it's a 10mm nut and a 5mm Allen key. For me, I find the best way to do this is using something like a battery powered gun. I don't recommend using an air powered gun because they tend to have way too much torque. This is actually a gun that I use a lot here in the shop. It's just actually meant for driving screws. It's not actually a nut gun, it's a screw driving gun. So it's much lower torque. Why do I want to use that lower torque? Simply because it allows me feel if there's something maybe not right in the wheel, or if there's a problem that I need to get ahead of. Unfortunately, quite time consuming, nothing really fun to see here other than a case of taking off each nut individually, and each bolt will stay behind in the split rim. And then once we get those off, we get to the stage, let's get the very first nut stuck in the gun. We'll get to the stage where we can take the wheel apart. So I'll keep tipping away here, give you a little bit of time lapse, and see you back in a moment. Okay, so we now have all of those nuts loosened, and what will now happen is the center core of this split rim will come out. It has all of the bolts just left sitting in it. It's a nice handy way of just keeping them all in arrangements. I'll show you what we need to check on this in a few minutes when we get to the stage where we're ready to do that. So next thing we need to do is we need to separate these two rims. Now they're held together with a kind of some kind of a silicone, and if I can find my blade, have it. So what we do is we need to find the groove, and there is a groove between the two wheels where each mating surface comes together. If we can find that groove with our blade, nice and simply there, just get the blade into it, and we just keep running all the way around. We're just going to break that sort of silicone sealant that's holding these wheels together. And when I start getting kind of close to the end here, I'm going to feel the wheels kind of starting to come apart and come into two pieces. I'm already kind of holding them together with my hand now. So then they'll just pull apart like that. And we are now into a case of going to clean these up on the wire wheel. So what are we trying to do? One, I want to take off all of this sort of silicone sealant stuff that the guys used. I want to be very careful not to go at this face here with the wire wheel, not to touch this face. This is a machined face. It has been skimmed. These wheels will have been put into a machine and they will have had that surface completely skimmed. So it is a machine surface, a really flat machine surface, and it's going to be important in a while. The second place I need to get the wire wheel into is into this area here. This is where the bead of the tire is going to seat, and when the bead of the tire seats in there, I want to get a really good seal. What's going to assure that seal is that this is scrupulously clean. Touching back on what I was talking about earlier on, tires actually move on the rims. Now they don't spin on the rim or anything like that, but when you go into a bad bump in the road, or you hit a pothole, or sometimes you're going up onto a curb or down off a curb, you'll have heard people say the tire burped. And what they actually mean by that is that when the tire got that really big compression, air will have escaped out the side of the rim. And that is a common thing on radial tubeless tires, this burping. What you want to happen is you want it to reseal after that burp. If you've got the tire some way stuck here with a sealant of some kind, then when that tire comes back down again, that seal will be broke. But now you've got a kind of a hard, poor material that the tire is sitting on, rather than nice clean aluminium, and that is now a pathway for leakage. So getting the aluminium just scrupulously clean, something like a wax or a tire fitters, they call it sealant, but it never goes hard. It's a kind of a grease or a wax paste. And what that actually does is it stays in there all the time to allow that movement of the tire. What I much prefer to do is I much prefer just to seal these tires up and let the rubber seal on the aluminium. And I've had brilliant success over the years with that being a permanent seal and not needing any kind of sealant or goo or gunk on these type of split rim wheels where they're very accurately machined and they're good material. So I'm going to head into the wire wheel now, and I'm going to start cleaning up these surfaces. We're over at my trusty old bench grinder over here, and I have a wire wheel attachment to it. Anybody who's considering getting one of these wire wheel attachments and grinder for their workshop, I cannot recommend one enough. I probably go to this 20 or 30 times every week. If it's just to clean up the tread of a bolt, or if it's like this to take off of sealant or clean up a part, this is probably one of the single most used power tools in my workshop on a weekly basis. So I cannot recommend one of these enough. I have taken off all of the old grinding stones and everything. I literally just have one wire wheel on one side, and I have it like that because I get the most amount of torque, the most amount of power. Technically speaking, there's supposed to be guards around this. It should have a big steel guard around it, but this is a reasonably low speed grinder. It's running about 1500 RPM. You know, from a safety point of view, if you are new to tools like this and it's not something you've ever used before, I really would incline to recommend using something like a face shield or something like that if you're using a grinder like this, open wheeled. I have huge amount of experience using one of these tools and have great respect for it, and I also make sure I position myself in such a way that I don't put myself in great danger. But with that said, don't do as I do, do it the right way and put yourself the right part of it. So what are we doing here? We're wire wheeling in this area here. Now, I can't stress enough that you're not trying to remove any material. You're just using the wire wheel to lightly remove any of the built up crud and kind of, I suppose, patina that's come on here on the inside. The same again for this black material here, whatever it is, some kind of boon end silicone. But we do not want to run this side of the, or we do not want to run the wheel on this side of the rim. So light pressure is all I'm using. Just a small amount of pressure, and I'm running the wheel around. I'm turning the wheel at an angle this way, and I'm turning the wheel at an angle that way to get both surfaces. Not loads of pressure. So at a high angle and a low angle. It's a really quick process, not long taken there at all. Same again now for where this silicone is. Again, just let the wheel work. You don't have to put loads and loads of pressure on. Being very careful. If the wheel is to skip off, I'm not hitting that surface. If I come at it this way, I'm going to hit that surface. So what's left now is a sort of a greasy, not particularly nice residue that the wire wheel leaves behind. The best way to get this off, if it's any kind of silicone based, I suppose a sealant of any kind, is ordinary standard painter's thinners. That's what I've found in over the years works the best. Now, I said to you I didn't want to run this surface on the wire wheel, which I didn't, but there is a very small amount of that sealant here on this edge. And what I'm using is a super fine Scotch-Brite pad that I have used a lot before on the die grinder. So I know it's completely worn down and its abrasive properties are pretty much gone. To be honest with you, this is no more than the likes of a kitchen green cleaning sponge. It's the same kind of material now. All the abrasive will be gone off of this pad. It's one that I would just keep in the shop for doing bits and pieces like this. It's no more than a coarse rag or a rough rag. And I'm just removing any of that excess material that I see there going around that wheel. So next thing to do is to get a cloth and put a little bit of standard thinners on it. And the result of that standard thinners is that it will just break any of those kind of sealants. It'll take them off, and what it will leave is a completely clean, almost factory fresh aluminium, which is exactly what we want. We don't want any residues on there that could potentially affect the wheel from sealing again in the future. So one of the things you'll have to keep doing is changing the sides of your cloth, because as that thinners breaks up any of the sealant that's on the surface, it'll go into an almost liquid format because the thinners will break it completely down. So if you're not continually moving around on your cloth, what you're doing is you're actually making a sort of a paint nearly, a residue that'll stay behind. So you want to keep breaking that up with the thinners and cleaning it off. And what we'll end up with hopefully here is a completely clean rim. Now, there's still little marks in there. That is where moisture has been inside the rim because of the air that was inflating the tire is not without moisture, and it has created a aluminium patina. That's why I'm showing you that, because I'm showing you how little pressure I used on the wire wheel. I didn't push this in so hard that it actually removed even that patina. It hasn't taken that off. Literally all I did with the wire wheel was take any of that silicone that might have been on there from the last tire fitter who put these tires on. Just on a nice new clean part of the rag, just one last wipe around with the thinners, and you're just checking your rag to make sure it's not coming off kind of still black in color. And that's telling me that we've gotten rid of all of that sort of residue and caked on stuff. The wonderful thing about standard thinners is it will completely flash off, and I'll have a dry surface that will be ready and prepared for when we go to reassemble the wheel. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the other side. I'm going to save you that, and I'll meet you back around the other part of the workshop where we'll start talking about the reassembly of this and what it is we need to do. Okay, I'm back over at my little perch, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about the inner core here just before I start putting this rim back together. So this is a really critical part of the wheel, because not only does this hold the two centers of the, the inner and outer wheel rim together, but it also is what centralizes the wheel in relation to the hub that the wheel will be mounted on. So something to check here is to make sure that there is no damage all the way around this outer periphery. You could have, in certain situations, maybe a nick or a little piece of material here that could get, you know, burr on it, or a piece sticking up out of it. When the wheel would go together, that could change the shape of the way the wheel goes together, and you could forever have a wobble in the wheel. The next part is really important. It is getting the seal on this wheel and making sure the tire is oriented correctly. Just before I do that, thank you very much to everybody who is new to the channel. I see the subscribers ticking in every day, and I really do appreciate you coming along and spending some time here. So if you're new, you are most welcome. To all my regulars who tune in every week and watch the videos, thank you so much for all your support in the coming weeks, months, and in the past weeks and months. I really do appreciate it. It makes it easier. People realize obviously that I'm a lot more busy in the garage. I'm back teaching in my day job as well. So between teaching, running the garage and making YouTube videos, I am a busy boy. So thank you very much everybody who comments, everybody who subscribes, and everybody who hits like. It really does encourage myself and Billy to get down here in the evening times and make these videos for you guys. So thank you so very much. Don't forget, give me a comment in the comment section below if you have any questions or you want to ask me about these. I love hearing from you guys and hearing your experiences and hearing what you have to say. And if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video. So let's start looking at putting this wheel together. So there's a couple of things we need to look at. One, we need to look at the tread pattern and how the wheel is going to rotate. Some wheels have marked the direction of rotation on the wheel. In the case of one of these tires, they have it here in an arrow. So it tells you the direction of rotation of this tire is that way. So how do we decide which way around to put this tire when we're assembling the rim? Well, that's pretty easy. This is the outer, that is the tire valve. So we know that if the direction of rotation is that way, then it's a front wheel, so that rim wants to be on that way. So when it goes on the car, it is going to drive in that direction. If we were talking about the other side, then in that case, the wheel is going to be flipped over. It's going to be this way, and you want to have it on that side. So just watch for that. It's one that you can easily miss. These dots, one is telling you that it's the outside, the red dot telling you it's outside, and yellow is the recommended position for the tire valve to go. So the yellow dot is where the factory is recommending you should line up the valve of the tire should be there. Generally speaking, in most cases, it won't make a massive difference where you put that. A few people have said to me, a few tire guys I know, that people like Yokohama actually specifically counterbalance the tire for the tire valve. I'm not sure I completely believe that. Maybe if one of you guys is a tire fitter or has good tire manufacturing knowledge, you can confirm or deny if that is. Stick it in the comment section below. I would be interested to hear that. But for me, I suppose if the manufacturer says that's the way to go, well, that's the way we're going to go. After that, it is well worth just checking that bead surface there, that there isn't a sort of a little imperfection or a piece. What could you do if there was? Maybe if it was a small nick or a little parting in it, you could hit it with some maybe 600 sandpaper to clear it up. If the nick is too big, then the chances are it probably won't seal. And really your only option to salvage that tire then would be a tube. Now most of the big mini suppliers still sell 10-inch tubes. I know Mini Spares for sure does. So you could do that. You could put tubes in here and it would salvage a tire that maybe was damaged. I have salvaged these rims as well before on race cars that have had a bit of a shunt, and this isn't a lovely flat surface anymore. There's a sort of a little bit of a shape in it. And I've salvaged those before by fitting a tube as well. And I keep a few in stock here kind of on a permanent basis just for that reason. If I ever come across a split rim that isn't sealing right or doesn't seal perfectly, stick a tube into it and it can work quite well. The only thing I will say to you is if you're putting a tube in it, it's a very good idea to put that bit of silicone like we seen the guys do that we machined off earlier on before you put the tire together, because I have seen before tubes getting pinched in that sort of gap between the two wheels. We're running this as a tubeless setup, so no need for that. The easiest way I found in the past to get these together properly is to simply set the big heavy offset on the ground, put your tube or your tire in on top of it, and then that leaves you with the mating face up like that. Just before you go near it with any silicone, line that valve up with that yellow dot and see does that work down below with the hole pattern in the rim. So I'm lining it up with the yellow dot and I can see I could actually do with moving this just a small little bit inside in the rim to get me a better alignment. Now I have good alignment between the yellow dot and the tire. I don't think it's super critical if it's a couple of millimeters either way, but it is worth just trying to get it close as possible, I suppose. Now, sealant, the big question. I have found through lots of trial and error that the brand by U-POL Tiger Seal is the best at solving this problem of sealing two rims together. When I'm using this in a tubeless setup, I don't do that big bead around the outside. I just simply put some here on the mating face. A few people in the past that seen me do this said, oh, do you not think having that silicone between the two faces or this silicone based adhesive between the two faces might cause the tire to shift or move at some stage, or the rims to move together. When you put this material in and you tighten down those bolts, this only sits in the hollows where there isn't material meeting face to face. Where material meets face to face, this will be entirely squeezed out. So anywhere that this surface is completely smooth and that surface is completely smooth, they will be bolted tightly together. So there's no fear of the two rims sitting on a bed of silicone and being able to shift or move around. That won't be the case. That would be, if that was the case, it would be the same across the board for all gasket surfaces. This is just a gasket surface. The reason that Tiger Seal seems to work very well for these, it works very well with aluminium and it works very well in sort of high temperature, high pressure environments. So for me, this is the stuff. I have tried Durco, the Sealant Durco in the past. Haven't had great luck with it, to be honest with you. I don't know whether it's that it goes off too quickly or it just doesn't work well with the aluminium or the flexibility of the aluminium. But for me, yeah, the Tiger Seal has been that. I'd be very interested, anyone else who's running a split rim and has done this particular thing, what have you used and what have you found good? Let me know in the comment sections below, because sometimes this is a bit like whether people like McDonald's or Burger King. It's the thing that they prefer rather than the brand itself being particularly good. How much am I putting on? a very, very light smear. I'm not looking for a big heavy coating here. I'm looking for just enough that'll take up any gaps that might be there, but not create a big squelchy mess when you put this together and you have this sealant oozing everywhere and making up a big mess. Incidentally, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to get this tiger seal off something, that standard base thinners we were looking at earlier on that we used to clean the wheel is probably the single best thing to break this stuff down. It's a 1K adhesive that seems to work really well with it. A few people have told me petrol works very well to break it down. Haven't actually tried it. I suppose it's just what you come across or what works for you. Now, what we can now do is we can put our rim in here, line it up with our bolt pattern, which we have there. Give it just a little bit of a work around just so that that sealant gets a chance to work evenly between the two surfaces. And then we can drop in our bolt ring. What I have done here, lads, is I knew the last time I looked at this, the way this was set up was that the valve was in the middle between the two wheel nuts, and that is the way I want to set it up again this time. I think that works the best. It's pretty much the way I always like to do it, so I think I'm going to put it back that way. Now, at this moment in time, a bit of ginger carefully has to go on because we're trying to hold all this together, and what it wants to do is fall apart. It's not a good idea to do that because you're going to start breaking that seal that we've already formed. So what I recommend is if you can hold the whole thing together, kind of, I put my leg on the back of it and hold the bolt. I have my nuts and washers over here, and then it's just a simple case of being methodical, starting at the first bolt, working your way around and putting each nut and washer on. There's no rocket science here. It's just a case of trying to be, I suppose, nice and even and make sure that you don't miss one. Once we have kind of each one of these on, we'll get the little electric screw gun back in and we'll spin these up. Now, we are not going to tighten them with the screw gun. We're just simply going to spin them up to the point where the nut is sitting down against the face of the wheel rim. Okay. I've gone around and spun all the nuts onto the bolts just until they reached the base of the split rim. You may or may not have been able to pick that up in the sped up video, but I started at a nut here on the top, then I did one down on the bottom, then I did one here at sort of 3 o'clock and one at 9 o'clock, just to get the rim to pull nice and even down so that I see this face kind of sitting down here nice and even, and then I spun them all up together. It might be a little overkill, but I always like when I have a big ring of bolts like that to just get a nice even pull around and then start spinning bolts up, rather than kind of pulling one side down and maybe squishing all of that sealant out and then bringing the other side in and potentially not having that nice even spread of sealant. So holding one of the Allen keys at the back, I've got my torque wrench set to 11.3 Newton meters. That is the standard torque for an 8.8 metric fastener in M6 with a nylon locking nut. That's the torque I've always used on these. I haven't had one of these come loose yet, so that seems to be the one that works. What I would say is, if you're in any doubt whatsoever, don't go by my number. Ring the manufacturer of your wheel and ask what their recommended torque is. You might say, Paul, you're going very overkill torquing those nuts. Remember, this is a wheel. This is a very important part of safety on your car. Over torquing a nut like this or over tightening a nut like this could lead to a failure, which could lead to a wheel that doesn't perform correctly and could lead to a very serious accident. So any place like that, brakes, wheels, suspension, I am very hesitant not to torque bolts and know that they are correct. I know there's people that say, just give that a good tighten up there. You've got 16 bolts here, and if one of them is tighter than the other, it could take a lot more force. So it's just nice to be methodical, use your torque wrench and know you're doing it right. if you wanted to go really all the way on this, you could actually mark each one of these as you torque them, so that you know when you get around to the last mark bolt, you're there. I like to go around a second time, just in case anything moves or shifts when you torque it down. I've had this before in the past. A bolt comes up to torque, but when you torque all the rest of them down, that bolt is not quite at torque again. So I don't mind going around a second time and checking the torque. Another thing I see people doing when they use torque wrenches that annoys me a lot is they'll do this. That second click is a complete waste of time. Once the bolt comes up to torque, there's now more friction between the head of that bolt and the surface of the rim that you're not checking the torque a second time. You bring the bolt up to torque once, and once it's up to torque, that's it. You're there. Trust the wrench, trust the tool, it's designed for the job. So we're getting close now to coming around to our last couple of bolts here, and we're at tightness. What we'll do then is go around one more time, and we know then that our wheel is correctly put back together and the bolt is up to the torque it should be. So that was the first one we started with. So like I said, the only reason I go around a second time is just to check, make sure they all come up to torque, and funnily, that one's moving. So let's just check that one again. That's common when you bring down, there you go, that one went a little bit more. So it's no harm just going around one more time, checking each one and making sure that they're now all where they should be. And that's nothing more than the silicone settling down, squeezing out, or something just as simple as just a little bit of movement in the rim. So that second run around makes all the difference. After that, there's actually not a lot more we can do. We'd like to actually seat this rim, or seat the tire on this rim, but we actually can't. And the reason why we can't is because we need that silicone, it's not silicone, but the Tiger Seal to set off. So we don't have the option of blowing that up now. You'll have to leave them overnight, but I think you've seen enough tires in your lives get brought up to inflation pressure. There is one thing I want to tell you. When you're trying to inflate this tire for the first time, it's worth putting a little bit of tire soap if you can get your hands on it. If you can't, something like WD-40. I don't recommend a silicone based lube because that can affect the tire. So something like WD-40 or even a little bit of dish soap would work perfectly well, just to put in there to give the tire a chance to get out on the rim. Typically speaking, you have to inflate these over road pressure to get the bead to sit out on the rim. There's a little ridge in there that the bead has to go over and sit into. Typically speaking, it could take 40 to 50 psi to actually get that tire to seat on the bead. Be ready for it when you do. Put on your ear protection because it's going to make a big loud pop when that does seat on the bead, and you'll know it's there. It could give you a fright if you haven't done it before. Then you can let the pressure back down to the road going tire pressure. Put the wheel back in your car and be delighted with yourself because you just changed your tire yourself on your split rim. If anyone has any more questions about split rims they'd like me to answer, please don't forget to put them in the comment section below and I will answer them. And I'll see you guys on the next one.